Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Coyle. NFL draft coming up this week on Thursday. I did, over the past few weeks, a full 7-round mock draft, all 255 picks, and a description on each player. You can check out that link. I'll post the link to that in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram. My link to those articles is in my bio. I usually also post the links to the Twitter articles right after I publish the article. And I also started a new page this week at Beef Up Front on Twitter, so you can check all my articles out there. This will be, just gonna go through my first round of the mock draft for this pod and kind of give you a little more insight to the player that I picked to each team in the first round. On the website in the article, I kind of just did a sentence description or two on each player just because of the amount of picks, but I'm going to go into a little more detail with this. And, all right, hope you guys enjoy. So we're going to start it off with the first overall pick, the Cincinnati Bengals. So we have the Bengals taking, at number 1 overall, I have the Bengals taking Joe Burrow, quarterback from LSU. Pretty much every mock draft has that happening. He put up record numbers last year in the SEC. He's a smart, accurate, tough quarterback, and he's going to help try and bring the Bengals out of mediocrity. Over the past decade, 20 years, they haven't won a playoff game, so Burrow's been a winner his whole career, he says. He led LSU to the national title game last year. And in a competitive AFC North with young quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and one of the all-time greats in Ben Roethlisberger, Cincinnati needs to get a guy better than Andy Dalton in there to help lead their franchise. And Burrow's going to be the pick. There's no real hiding that anymore. And he's going to be the guy to look to lead Cincinnati to the promised land moving forward. So that will put the Washington Redskins at number 2 overall on the clock. So with this pick, we have the Washington Redskins taking defensive end / edge rusher Chase Young out of Ohio State. Ron Rivera, new coach down in Washington, is a defensive-minded guy. He's going to try and build a great defensive unit like he did in Carolina back in the day. And hope Dwayne Haskins pans out. You could make an argument for the Redskins maybe taking a guy like Tua Tagovailoa here, who might have a better long-term potential than Haskins, but it might be too early to write Haskins off right now. And Chase Young's one of the best edge rushers we've seen in recent years, probably within the last 10 years. Him, Myles Garrett, and Jadeveon Clowney are the 3 top prospects that come to mind. So that is our pick for that reason. The Redskins also have a great defensive line already with several first-round picks. So if you add another guy like Chase Young to the mix there, he could elevate that group even more. And especially in a division with young quarterbacks like Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones, who all 3 of those teams are going to be kind of relying on the pass these next few years. You need a guy who can get after the quarterback, and Chase Young's also no slouch in the run game either. He's gonna cause havoc in the backfield, and he's going to be a very good player for a long time and has a lot of Pro Bowl potential to him. So with that being said, we'll move on to the 3rd overall pick, which is held by the Detroit Lions right now. So with the 3rd overall pick, I have the Detroit Lions selecting cornerback Jeff Okudah out of Ohio State. He's the number 1 prospect at the cornerback position in this year's class. After trading out Darius Slay this offseason to Philadelphia, a hole at corner was opened. The Lions went out and signed Desmond Trufant in free agency, but Okudah is a better long-term prospect. Trufant's kind of towards the back end of his career. He's still a solid player, but they need someone who can fill that number 1 corner role. And Okudah's tape suggests that he's the best corner out there for this year's draft. He's got great footwork. He's got solid speed, and he's expert in man coverage. So a guy going forward in Detroit that this regime can build around on the back end, and hopefully can get the Lions out of the basement. And they're hoping Okudah can be one of those guys who they can eventually hang their hat on as a lockdown, shutdown, number 1 overall type corner. So we're going to move on to the 4th overall pick now, which is held by the New York Football Giants. With the 4th overall pick, I have the New York Giants selecting Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle out of Iowa. Wirfs is a guy who he comes from an offensive line factory that is the Iowa Hawkeyes, known for producing great linemen. Brandon Sheriff down in Washington is one of the guys that comes to mind, but Wirfs is a tackle. He's going to provide protection for Daniel Jones. He's going to help create rushing lanes for Saquon Barkley. And the Giants have kind of been in the market for premier linemen in the past few years, and Wirfs has the athletic ability and natural athleticism to eventually become a left tackle after Nate Solder's departure. But for right now, he could slide in, be the right tackle, and have a good career in New York, and hopefully be a building block for that young franchise with Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. Okay, we're going to move on to the 5th overall pick here, which is held by the Miami Dolphins. One of their first, they have three picks in the first round. This is their first one. So with this pick, I have the Dolphins taking a risk in some folks' eyes because of his health issues, but I have them taking Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback from Alabama. He's one of the better college quarterbacks I can remember ever seeing in my 20 years. He has a great accuracy. He's got a very nice arm. He can throw the deep ball well, I think, and he's got good mobility too. He's not as athletic when it comes to like avoiding pass rushers as Russell Wilson, but he's got that mobility to him where he can extend the plays. And the Dolphins need a guy who they can call their franchise quarterback. And you look at Tua, he came in Alabama and dominated the SEC for 2 years. Even that one game, national title his freshman year when he came in the second half and led Bama to the national title, shows you that he can perform under pressure. And he's a guy who a lot of people rave about his leadership abilities, being able to play under Nick Saban. He's known for already playing like basically in an NFL system, and he knows how to deal with that kind of pressure. The only concerns on him are his health. He's had a few ankle injuries. He had the hip injury, but he's apparently 100% clear now. So going forward, you just have to bag on him being healthy and hope that he can be the franchise quarterback if you're the Dolphins. So with the next pick, that is the 6th overall pick, which is currently owned by the Los Angeles Chargers. So with that pick, I have, With that pick, I have them. This hasn't been viewed in many mock drafts so far, but I have them taking Jordan Love, the quarterback from Utah State. You could make an argument for an offensive tackle here, or maybe even Isaiah Simmons, linebacker from Clemson, or a quarterback like Justin Herbert. But I think that the Chargers are content with rolling with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback this year, seeing how that goes, and letting a guy like Jordan Love sit behind him and develop. If you watch Love's tape, he makes a lot of throws that many NFL quarterbacks can't do. He's got elite arm talent. He's got to clean up some stuff with like decision making and learning how to read the NFL offense, because he played in like a pass happy Utah State team that was in the Mountain West that didn't really face the greatest competition. Kind of like we saw with Josh Allen. He just got all the natural raw tools though to be a good NFL quarterback, and I think the Chargers are in a position where Tyrod Taylor is a solid enough quarterback who could potentially lead them to the playoffs. And then kind of like the Chiefs did a few years ago with Patrick Mahomes, and then slide Love in like they did, like the Chiefs did with Mahomes a year later, and hope he takes his game to another level. So that'll move on to the 7th pick. The 7th pick is currently held by Carolina Panthers. So at that pick, I have Matt Rule at his first draft pick as head coach of the Panthers, taking linebacker / safety / I guess you just call him a defensive weapon, Isaiah Simmons from Clemson. He's a guy who will play all over the field. He's got great speed, quickness, strength. He can cover running backs, tight ends, receivers. He's just a versatile player. Kind of reminds me of how Eagles used Malcolm Jenkins over the years, but a more taller and athletic guy. So Isaiah Simmons is a guy who Matt Rule kind of want to build his defense around, especially with Luke Kuechly out the door after he retired this offseason. So look for Matt Rule. He's always talked about how he wants to build his roster around like freak athletic players, and a guy like Isaiah Simmons fits that description to a T. So look for Simmons to go to the Panthers, or this could be a potential trade back spot if Matt Rule doesn't see a fit for him in the defense. But a good coach, I think, like Matt Rule, will find a way to find a role where Simmons could thrive in their defense. So that'll move us on to the next pick, 8th overall by the Arizona Cardinals. So with the 8th pick, I have the Cardinals taking offensive lineman Jedrick Wills. All offseason before the DeAndre Hopkins trade to Arizona, I wanted them to take CeeDee Lamb to reunite him with Kyler Murray. I think that would be very good for ticket sales down in Arizona, but also definitely help them long-term winning football games as they have great chemistry together. But after trading for Hopkins, that they got their new number one threat down there with Hopkins, and he can form a solid trio with Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk. And they got a few other young wide receivers down there. So the next focus for their team should be protecting Kyler Murray, and Jedrick Wills Jr. from Alabama would be a perfect fit there. Like I was talking about with Tua, Jedrick Wills has experience playing against great players already from playing in Alabama in the SEC. He's experienced in like a pro system like they have down in Tuscaloosa. So he's been through it all. He's an experienced guy, and he's a very good athlete. And other than Wirfs, I think Wills is the best lineman in this class, and that's why I slotted him here to the Cardinals. So the next pick, 9th overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a year after signing Nick Foles to a big contract in free agency, the Jaguars shipped him out after that experiment not working. Gardner Minshew, he's a solid player at quarterback, but I don't think he's a guy that the Jaguars are sold on and could take them over the top. So with that reasoning, I'm going to give them Justin Herbert, the quarterback from Oregon. Another strong arm kid, big 6'6", strong body. Very mobile. He's got a very fluid release. He's pretty accurate passer as well. He just needs more time to learn the game, I think. A lot of stuff I've read about him and heard about him. He's got some of the best arm talent in the draft, but he doesn't necessarily trust it all the time. And he's going to have to learn how to make the reads and throw the deep ball, because in college he checked it down a lot. I mean, Oregon, a fast-paced offense, you can just hit guys across the middle, hope they run for days. But in the NFL, you're going to have to make big-time throws to win games. And a guy like Herbert fits that description eventually, I think. But he could definitely use a few like years. I'm not going to say a few years, maybe a season or even like half the season to sit and develop. And he can compete with Minshew for the starting job right away, I think. But I think he'd be best suited for a guy maybe first like 6 weeks, sit behind Minshew, learn how to be an NFL quarterback, and then maybe like after your bye week or something, take over as a starter and be the long-term answer down there in Jacksonville, who's been battling QB issues for years. Blake Bortles was never a great quarterback down there either, and we see where he's at now. He's a backup for the Rams. Nick Foles got traded again to the Bears, so it's kind of been a QB carousel down there, and they hope with this pick of Herbert that solves their issues. So that'll move us to the 10th overall pick, which is held by Cleveland right now. So at this pick, I have the Browns taking Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle from Louisville. After signing Jack Conklin in the offseason, he's going to be the right tackle for Baker Mayfield. So now he needs a guy on the left side to protect his blind side. Because Browns have one of the most loaded offenses in the league. They went out and signed Austin Hooper. They still have David Njoku, so that's a very formidable duo at tight end. They got in the backfield, they got Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and a receiver, they got Odell and Jarvis Landry. So 6 very, very good offensive weapons right there. Now Mayfield just needs some protection. If you get one of the best run blockers in the draft in Mekhi Becton here, and also a guy who can protect the passer at a very solid rate as well. He would be a perfect fit. After Wills and Tristan Wirfs got picked already, it'd probably be between Becton and Andrew Thomas here, and I just think that the Browns, especially under their new analytics kind of driven front office, that Becton will fit what they're looking to draft better than Thomas would at this point. And he's a big road grader. He needs a little bit of more work in pass protection, but he's a big, strong guy, one of the freakier athletes in this year's draft, especially at his size. He ran like a 5.1 40 at 6'5", 350 pounds, something crazy like that at the combine. So he's a guy who's seen his draft stock rise over the past year, and I think his best football is ahead of him. So that'll put us at the 11th overall pick, which is currently held by Joe Kometz and Eddie Turner's New York Jets. With the 11th pick, I have the New York Jets taking CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver out of Oklahoma. I know my buddy Joe and Eddie have been calling for elite receiver for Sam Darnold for quite some time now, and I think this pick fixed that. You could make the argument for Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs here as well, two very good Alabama receivers, but I think Lamb and the way he can make contested catches and his ability to make plays with the ball in his hands after the catch is what sells Joe Douglas and the New York Jets on him here, and fits him in as the number one receiver going forward for Sam Darnold. I think that is a perfect fit. Lamb, I don't really see much more room for improvement in him. I mean, he could improve his speed a little bit, but that's more of a natural thing. He's a strong receiver. He's got good, solid hands, and he's going to be a playmaker from day one. A lot of people have compared him to DeAndre Hopkins. If Sam Darnold got a DeAndre Hopkins, I think that would make him very happy. So that's going to move us on to the 12th overall pick, which is held right now by the newly found Las Vegas Raiders. That's weird to say, but the Raiders are now on the clock. So with that pick, I have the aforementioned Jerry Jeudy going here. I think Judy's one of the better receiving prospects we've seen in quite some time. Just an elite route runner. He tore up the SEC, kind of like I was saying with Tua and Burrow. He's played against great competition already. He's an experienced guy. And Mike Mayock and John Gruden love to invest. We've seen since we saw last year in that Alabama pipeline and Clemson as well. They like to take their chances on guys from successful college programs, and there's no question about that Bama fits that description. Jeudy is a very agile player as well. I like what he can do with the ball in his hands. He reminds me of like a Stephon Diggs type receiver. And we don't know if Derek Carr's the answer at quarterback in Las Vegas and if John Gruden's fully sold on him and Mike Mayock, but if the Raiders can get a guy like Jeudy here, that's only going to elevate Carr's game better. They were kind of hoping they would have their number one with Antonio Brown, but we've seen that whole debacle and what's going on. So they have to take Jerry Jeudy here, and that could be the missing piece of their puzzle on offense. I think Raiders are a very underrated team, and they could make some serious noises here if Derek Carr gets a few better weapons in this year's draft. That'll move us on to the 13th overall pick, which is the San Francisco 49ers after a trade up with the Indianapolis Colts. So with the 13th pick, I'm going to keep this one short and simple. I think if this guy's here at this pick, Henry Ruggs, the receiver from Alabama, he will be the draft pick. Ruggs is just a deep speed threat. And after watching Tyreek Hill be the reason that Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes being the reason the 49ers lost the Super Bowl because of that deep speed, I think the 49ers need to go get their elite deep speed element, and that will be Henry Ruggs, the fastest man in this year's draft. He could be Jimmy Garoppolo's number one deep receiver. They got Deebo Samuel underneath and running like gadget plays. George Kittle can do it all. I feel like that deep speed element is the one thing that 49ers offense is missing that could take them over the top next year if they get a guy like Ruggs. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the 14th overall pick, which currently is held by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So with the 14th overall pick, I have Tampa Bay selecting running back DeAndre Swift out of Georgia. A lot of experts have the Bucs taking a offensive lineman here. I think you could get a solid offensive lineman in the second round with their pick that the Buccaneers need, and I think Swift is just an undeniable talent that GM Jason Licht and head coach Bruce Arians are going to have to pull the trigger on, especially after drafting Tom Brady. They're in a certainly win-now mode. This is like a spot where you could see maybe them taking like a quarterback if it wasn't for Tom Brady. But now they got Brady, probably only at least 1, maybe 2 years. They're going to have to go all in and win now. I think Swift fits perfectly in that offense. Ronald Jones is a solid running back, but he's not going to win you Super Bowl, I think. I think DeAndre Swift will be better suited there. He can run between the tackles, run outside, catch the ball, and he's good in pass protection. And that's what Tom Brady needs in his running back. He relies on those guys out of the backfield to make a lot of catches and make big plays for him as well. Tom Brady's like a nice, short, accurate passer over the years. And if you get a guy like Swift, he can cause havoc out of the backfield for people. So I feel like that is a very good pick for the Bucs and might be one of my favorites of the draft if it happens. With the next pick, it's the Denver Broncos at number 15. So with the 15th overall pick, I have Denver selecting defensive lineman Derek Brown out of Auburn. Brown's a guy who's been compared to Ndamukong Suh just because of his power and his inside rush ability. He can defend the run, and he's going to cause havoc in the backfield. And Vic Fangio, the head coach out in Denver, loves defensive-minded guy. And pairing him up with newly acquired defensive tackle Jarrell Casey, and with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb rushing off the edge, that's going to be a defensive line causing great havoc in the backfield, and especially in a division where you're going to have to compete with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, you're going to need someone to get after him. And Derek Brown's just another guy to add to that line. He's one of the more talented players in this draft, but I didn't really just find anywhere to slot him in yet. And I think that the Broncos would get great value here by picking him. I don't think Brown's a guy that will get past 15. So for the 16th overall pick, that'll move us halfway through the first round. The Atlanta Falcons are now on the clock. Sorry about that. So the Falcons are a team I feel like that's always in the market for either an edge rusher or a corner. And especially this offseason after letting go of Desmond Trufant. They also let go of Vic Beasley. They brought in Dante Fowler Jr. on the D-line, so I think the more pressing need is corner. And we're going to have them taking cornerback C.J. Henderson from Florida. I think he ran a 4.38 40, so he's got great speed. His one weakness is tackling, but he's an aggressive player, so it's certainly there. He just probably has to work on his technique a little more. He's a very great corner and man-to-man coverage. In most other drafts, I think he would be the first corner off the board, but you have a rare talent like Okudah back there right now that I think is a better prospect than him. So Henderson falls a little bit, but at 16 overall, I think the Falcons are getting very good value and a cornerback that they could potentially hang their hat on as their number one guy, especially down in the NFC South. Great receivers like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin in Tampa Bay, Michael Thomas, guys like that. There is a lot of good receivers down in the NFC South, and especially I forgot a guy like DJ Moore or even Christian McCaffrey, who's like a running back / receiver. You're going to need to cover, and especially in the NFL passing league nowadays, the games relied on cover corners and your pass rush. So I think there's a big drop off in the corner talent after you take Okudah and Henderson. And I feel like you could find more suitable edge rushers in the later rounds. So I'm going to have the Falcons, taking C.J. Henderson right here. So that'll move us to pick 17, which is held by the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys have had a lot of moving parts this offseason. I think if Henderson fell to them and the Falcons didn't pick him, or if the Cowboys really like Henderson and feel like they should trade up for him, that could be a move as well. But I think if not, edge rusher is a good spot. And I think other than Chase Young, K'Lavon Chaisson from LSU is a amazing prospect. As an Eagles fan, I hope Dallas doesn't pick him. I think he's going to be a 10-plus sack guy for many years. He's a raw prospect, and he still put up really good numbers down in the SEC at LSU. This is a guy who's a pure edge rusher. He's not going to defend the run much, but with DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side, I think a power rusher like him would benefit from having a speed rusher like Chase Young on the other side, kind of mix it up for offensive lines and offensive coaches looking to scheme. They don't really know how to counter that with speed and power on opposite sides. So Chase Young, especially with the Cowboys moving to a 3-4, I think he could be a 3-4 edge rusher as like an outside backer. So he's a guy who's going to be a pass rushing havoc for years to come. Long arms, very athletic, quick burst off the line of scrimmage, as I've read and watched him. So he's a guy that I think has a lot of potential and could become one of the better players to come out of this draft. So with the 18th overall pick, that is currently held by the Miami Dolphins. That is their second first-round pick. I have them taking... Oops, 1 second. I have them taking safety Xavier McKinney from Alabama. McKinney, I think, is one of the more safer and reliable picks in this draft. Like I've been touching on, I feel like I'm beating a dead drum, but the Alabama products I feel like are always a safe pick, especially with a guy who excelled down there like McKinney. He's a reliable player. He's going to be in your defensive backfield for 8 to 10 years and producing well. I don't know how much of a Pro Bowler he'll be, but he's going to be a reliable safety for years to come. And I think after taking a risk on a guy like Tua earlier with health problems, you need to take a more reliable player with this pick like McKinney, ensuring that you're going to get good value. And especially with after getting Byron Jones this season from the Cowboys in free agency, and already having Xavier Howard at the other cornerback, getting a safety that's just going to in the first round, that's just going to make for a stronger back end on defense. And Brian Flores, I like the way he's building his roster down there. So that'll move us on to the 19th overall pick of the first round, which is held by the Las Vegas Raiders. This is their second pick of the first round. I have them taking one of my favorite prospects in the draft. If it weren't for his position value going down in recent years in the NFL with all the sub packages being played, I think he'd be a top 10 pick. But I'm going to go Kenneth Murray, the linebacker here from Oklahoma. Murray is one of the best leaders in the draft I've heard. Great tackler. He's got good sideline speed. I think he's 6'3" as well, 250 pounds. He's a big, strong guy. He's not afraid to get in there and play the run. He can cover the pass. And one of the things that Raiders defense is missing is a guy in the middle of the defense to be like the captain. So Mike Mayock and John Gruden are definitely going to be fans of this guy leading their defense. He kind of reminds me of like a Patrick Willis type. I don't know if he's going to be that good, but just with his all-around natural ability and his leadership skills, that makes for a great pick for Las Vegas, especially down here at 19 overall. So that moves us on to pick number 20, which is held by Jacksonville Jaguars after the trade with the Rams for Jalen Ramsey during the season last year. I have the Jaguars here taking defensive lineman Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina. Kinlaw had a great week at the Senior Bowl. I don't believe he played in the game, but he lit it up at practice all week and in the drills and met with a lot of teams, and a lot of teams came away impressed with him. He's a defensive lineman who could play in the interior on a 4-3, or I think he could play on the outside in a 3-4. He's got great pass rushing skills. He's got a great motor. and he's a guy who I think is just kind of scratching the surface of what he can become. Long arms, big strong hands. I like the way that he can move linemen out of the way with ease, and he can use speed to get around them as well. So he's a versatile player, and Jaguars are kind of rebuilding their defense after having an elite unit for a few years back, 2 or 3 years ago. They were one of the top defenses, but all those guys are out. So getting a strong lineman with upside on defense is definitely a way to kind of rebuild your foundation on that side of the football. So the next pick will be the Philadelphia Eagles selecting at 21 overall. So with this pick, Howie Roseman better select a receiver, or Twitter and the real city of Philadelphia will just burn to the ground, I feel like, with the Eagles fans' displeasure. After watching what Carson Wentz had to deal with last year after injuries to guys like Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson, investing a receiver here is a must, especially a guy that Carson Wentz can build around. And the best one on the board right now, in my opinion, is Justin Jefferson, slot receiver from LSU, who can also play on the outside. I feel like if you've been keeping up and reading with mock drafts, especially mine, this has been a pick. It's been there for a while. Jefferson's a guy, though, who's kind of been rising up some draft boards, and he might not even be here at 21. So if the Eagles really think that he's their guy and the other big three receivers are off the board, they might even have to move up for him. But Jefferson has great hands, runs great routes, and he's got good size, especially if you're going to try and play him in the slot. He's a guy who I think will have the height advantage over most of the inside slot corners. And I think he has red zone potential as well. Had 111 catches, it was either like 16 or 18 touchdowns and like over 1,500 receiving yards in the SEC last year with Joe Burrow. So there's some great numbers. One of the better receiving seasons we've seen from a college receiver in recent years. But I like Jefferson there, and I feel like if he's available at 21, he's definitely going to be the pick. So with that being said, we're going to move on to pick 22 overall, which is currently owned by the Vikings. With this pick, I have the Vikings selecting cornerback Trayvon Diggs. Kind of ironic. He's the brother of Stefon Diggs, who they just shipped out this offseason. So some people are saying family ties. They might not want to bring in another Diggs brother just because Stefon's kind of end of his tenure there. He was requesting a trade and wanted to get out, so there might be some drama. But I think Diggs is he's a receiver turned cornerback down at Alabama, another Bama player here in the first round. He's got great ball skills. He's got solid speed, and he's aggressive. And I like the way he plays man coverage. The Vikings lost Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, and Xavier Rhodes in their defensive backfield this offseason to free agency. So they have a very big pressing need at corner, and I think they also pick a 25. So with one of these two picks, they're definitely going to invest in a corner, and I like Diggs, especially with the aggressive style defense Mike Zimmer plays. I think a corner like Diggs fits in that defense best. 23rd overall pick is the New England Patriots, who are now on the clock. With this pick, I have first pick of the post-Tom Brady era up in New England is Yetur Gross-Matos, defensive end / edge rusher, I guess you could say as well, from Penn State. I think he's more of a raw prospect. He needs to add more moves, but he's got all the tools to become a good edge rusher in the league. Patriots have one of the older teams in the league, so especially with a bunch of guys leaving this offseason, it might be the start of a new era in New England, and they need to start replenishing that defense with some youth. And I think rushing the passer other than quarterback, an edge rusher is the most important thing in today's NFL to have, and I think Gross-Matos has some good potential. He's got a lot of untapped potential to build around, but he's also a player I think who could step in if you're playing in the Big Ten. He's got experience against programs like Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan State, teams who produce NFL caliber offensive linemen, and he's got experience against that. So he definitely has that going for him. He's a guy who I could see people kind of being confused as why he made it all the way down to 23 when we look back at this draft in 5 years, especially if he gets in New England, who has a great track record of developing prospects and getting the most out of them. With the next pick, the Saints will be selecting at 24. With this selection, this is I had this in my last mock draft, but I haven't seen any others. And I don't know why. I think it's a very smart pick, but I have them taking running back Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. Jonathan Taylor is a guy who he's lit up college football ever since he's came into the Big Ten, especially against Big Ten opponents. He's a speed guy, a former track runner, so he's got that long-term track speed. But he's had a lot of mileage playing at Wisconsin. Obviously, a big run-heavy offense with their linemen. Never really having good quarterbacks up there. So Taylor's had a heavy workload for the past 3 years that he's been there. He's had some fumbling issues as well, which he has to clean up. But he's a guy who I think is going to be a very productive rusher in between the tackles, and he can even break runs outside with his speed as well. And you might be thinking, why would they take him with Kamara? But we've seen the recent NFL running backs how on their second contract kind of fallen off, and I think with an explosive and dynamic player who can run the ball and run good routes and catch the ball out of the backfield like Alvin Kamara, you can move him into more of an offensive weapon role where he plays in the slot or he catches screen passes out of the backfield, stuff like that. And you only run him like 8 to 10 times a game. You preserve his career, and you kind of give Jonathan Taylor more of that heavy workload. Use him up, and the Saints have a great overall roster and a big-time offense already, and there's not many holes, so you kind of can go best player available, and I think Taylor might be the best player here. And just like imagine being another team having to stop Taylor and Kamara, just rotating those guys in, keeping them fresh. I think that would be causing a lot of headaches for defensive coordinators moving forward if they make that pick. So that'll take us to pick 25, the Vikings' second pick of the first round. With this pick, I have them after, like I touched on earlier, trading away Stephon Diggs. A need at receiver has opened up. And with this pick, I have them taking wide receiver Denzel Mims out of Baylor, who's really skyrocketed up some draft boards ever since the offseason began. He had a very good combine, very good Senior Bowl. Explosive guy who tests well, great athletic traits. Didn't have that great of a career at Baylor receiving, but he's still, you watch his film, he can make big plays. And he said in an interview recently, I can do things that like you really can't teach, which is big in the NFL. Just getting those guys with that natural raw ability. And if you get him into a receiver room with a guy like Adam Thielen who can kind of teach him the ropes, show him how to run better routes, because he didn't really run that many advanced routes down at Baylor. He's a guy who has a high ceiling and could develop into a big-time receiver in the NFC North. That'll move us on to pick 26, leaving us 6 more picks left in the first round. This is the Miami Dolphins with their third pick of the first round at 26 overall. I have the Dolphins here taking Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle. I don't know if he's going to slide this deep in the draft, but so this might be a spot where the Dolphins have to trade up if they want to get him. I just don't really see, after the run on tackles earlier in the draft, a spot for him. But if he fell to the Dolphins here, I think they would be very happy. Thomas is probably the 4th best offensive tackle in this draft, 4th best lineman, too, in my rankings overall. Tua needs some protection up front, especially with his injury history. And Thomas has arguably the most potential out of any lineman, him and Mekhi Becton probably, to be a long-term left tackle. He played at Georgia for a few years, so he has that experience going for him as well. And he's a guy I think you could slide in as your left tackle. He's going to have his bumps and bruises, ups and downs, but after trading away Laramie Tunsil, that left tackle hole was never filled by the Dolphins, and Thomas would fill it with this pick. The next pick is the Seattle Seahawks at 27. For years now, I feel like the Seahawks have been looking for to add more protection up front with Russell Wilson, and he always seems to be running for his life. But with this pick, we're going to try and solve that, and we're going to give them interior linemen on the offensive line. You can play center or guard, I think. Cesar Ruiz. He might be a more natural center. I believe their starting center has 1 year left on their contract, so we could play guard for this year and then slide in and be their center next year. But Ruiz is definitely the best interior lineman in this year's draft. Played at Michigan. He's just, like I said, he's gonna give that much needed protection for Russell Wilson. And the Seahawks are also an organization that prides itself on running the football. And he's going to be a guy who you can run behind for years, and especially down in the red zone, I think he's got a good jump off the ball. He's going to get out, and he plays with power. And I think he's an athletic guy you could use in screens, and if you're playing him at guard, he can pull as well. So that will put us to pick 28, which is held by the Baltimore Ravens. Here I have the Ravens selecting Patrick Queen, linebacker from LSU. After C.J. Mosley departed last year to the Jets, I don't think the Ravens were ever able to really fill that hole. So they filled a year later with Queen, who could be the next C.J. Mosley. They've had a great run on linebackers with Ray Lewis, and kind of transitioning into Mosley being their next great linebacker there. I think Patrick Queen could be the next great linebacker for Baltimore. Another guy with great sideline-to-sideline speed, tough player, and he's really good when it comes to covering running backs and tight ends. He can, like I said, he can stick the running back out of the backfield. That's one of his strongest suits, I think, on like out routes, swing passes, stuff like that. And he's going to get downhill fast and make a tackle. And he's a very serviceable leader. Played at LSU, so he's got that big game experience. He won the national championship. He was their starting linebacker. So a guy like that would fit great into Baltimore's plans for the present and the future. With the next pick, 29th overall, the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. The Titans have that blue-collar, bring your lunch pail to work every day kind of mentality. They pride themselves on toughness. Guys who are gonna follow their program, just fit into their culture. That's who they want. And H.A. Epineza, defensive end / defensive lineman, I guess you could say as well, from Iowa, fits that mold. He's a Big Ten experienced guy. Like I said, I like those guys who've played in those big games, have a big time playing experience, and he's a guy who can rush off the edge. He's got pretty good power, not the fastest, most athletic guy, but he's tough as nails. He's got a great motor, and he's going to get after the quarterback, and I think he could be a guy who gets you between 6 and 10 sacks a year, and that, with a win-now team like Tennessee, that fits into their plans pretty well. Next pick is the Packers at number 30 overall. So here I have the Packers selecting wide receiver T. Higgins out of Clemson. Higgins, a big receiver. I'm not gonna say big body, but he's a tall, lanky receiver kind of. He can make contested catches. I think he's got to add some more strength to put on some muscle to compete in the red zone a little bit better and be able to get off things like press coverage. But he's also a bit of a slower receiver, but I think he's good with the ball in his hands after the catch, and he provides a big target who can make those contested catches most of the time for a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers loves to throw that back shoulder fade, and I could see Higgins working opposite of Davante Adams really well, especially on that back shoulder fade with his big body, kind of like boxing out defenders, pushing off, like getting some separation on there and be able to control the ball on the sideline. I think he fits perfect there. And Davante Adams needs a guy across from him to draw some attention to free him up more. So I feel like that pick fits well also. So 31, we're going to go to the San Francisco 49ers, NFC runner-ups, or the NFC champion Super Bowl runner-up. So with this pick, I have them taking a corner whose draft stock kind of fell because of injuries, but going into the year, he was viewed as a number 1 overall corner. It's corner Bryce Hall from Virginia. long arm, he's got good range, and he's a zone corner. I think that's the biggest thing for the 49ers. Find a guy who fits their defensive zone scheme. He's kind of like, he relies on his zone coverage, just like Richard Sherman has always played on their back end and has played when he was with the Seahawks. So drafting a guy like Hall here to fit their scheme and potentially take over for Richard Sherman in the coming years and help right now as well would be a good pick. And with the last pick of the first round, I have the Kansas City Chiefs on the clock. So with this pick, after winning the Super Bowl, the Chiefs obviously don't have that many holes on the roster. They didn't lose that many people. But one thing I think they could improve is their back end on defense. And I have them taking cornerback Jeff Gladney from TCU here. Cornerback with Big 12 experience, so playing against teams with frequent air raid offenses. He was one of the bright spots of TCU's defense. A tough, feisty inside slot type corner. He's really good at man-to-man. In the AFC West, if you look, guys like Keenan Allen, or if the Raiders take a guy like Jerry Jeudy, you're going to need a guy to cover those shiftier receivers. And the Chiefs' pass defense was definitely the worst part of that defense and overall roster last year. So getting a guy like Gladney to help shore that up will only benefit them going forward. So that'll do it for the first round. Like I said, I did all 255 picks, all 7 rounds. I posted that article. You can check that out. I'll put the link to that exact article in the description below. Like I said, follow our new page on Twitter at BeefUpFront. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram at RyanCool35. I always post new articles up on there. Like I said, just keep checking for some content coming out. I appreciate all the support recently as I've been kind of starting this journey. And I look forward to pushing out some more content for you guys. And I appreciate all the attention you're getting me. And like I said, thanks for watching, and stay safe out there and enjoy the draft.